Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to this afternoon's lesson. And I think we're going to touch on so much because today what I'm planning to do with you is to teach you, will help you to remember when to use is, am, or are, or any other concords. Now, I'm Mrs. Swart, and we're going to work through this together. So, concords are verb and subject agreement. So all this tells us is that if we are speaking about something that is singular, the verb has to correspond with the singular. But that's where English gets a little bit confusing, because what happens is you find that sometimes it appears to be plural, which means more than one, and then your verb agreement doesn't seem to make sense. But there are rules to apply, and these rules, once you know them, will make it so much easier for you. And I know you're going to grasp it easily. But what you also need to do, make sure that you know your pronouns. So remember, with concords, it's not an aeroplane, so it's not this Concord that's on the picture, although some of you might not know that's what the aeroplane looked like. These concords are a little bit different. Let's look at when we have and. We know very simply when we have two things together, we say this one and that one, it becomes plural because we use the pronoun they. So James and Gina are good athletes because they are, when we look at our pronouns. But you must remember the following, and this is where English gets a tiny bit tricky. If two nouns form one idea, things like, okay, every man and woman is, every is, each and every one is. Now we get stuff like this. When we speak of bacon and eggs, is my favorite dish. We're speaking of one dish. That is why the verb is in the singular. And the same with macaroni and cheese, is good too. It's one dish. But what happens when we look at, say, two items? When we think of buying the individual items to make the bacon and eggs, to make the cheese and macaroni, or macaroni and cheese, then it becomes a little different. But what we've added here is the word both. And that's going to help you to know that, aha, yeah, they're not speaking about the one dish, they're speaking about two different items. So bacon and eggs are both sold out. Cheese and macaroni are both rather fattening. So you see how easy it is to then identify it. But with this, these are rules that you need to learn. And it'll become more comfortable for you to use them the more you apply them and the more you practice using the language. And at the end of this lesson, of course, you are going to look at the quiz. You're going to try the quiz and see if you get it right. Now we have things like when we find the word or, and when we use either or, you've already probably written tests where you asked to write two sentences over, but you have to use either or and neither nor, something like that. Not only, but also, and not, but. Now, when you get this, you have to look at the noun or the pronoun nearest to the verb. Okay, remember that, nearest the verb. So you get things like Jenny or the girls are responsible. And why is it the word are and not is? For the simple reason you're looking at the noun or pronoun nearest to the verb. And that is why you have it like that. But of course, if you don't know your parts of speech, you won't be able to identify your verbs. Then you can look at the rest of the list here. Neither Jenny nor the girls are responsible. Not only Jenny, but also Billy is responsible, because we're looking at Billy and Billy is singular. So that means that because Billy is singular, it takes the singular form of the verb. So remember, it must make sense. It must be comfortable to use. Those of you who are English home language will be applying these rules and you won't know why. So now you have the opportunity to learn to see why you're applying them. When we look at with, it could be with, together with, and like, and including, as well as. Then you're going to look at the first noun that appears. You're not going to look at the second one. Remember, with the previous one, we looked at the one closest to the verb. So you see, these are some of the rules you can go and study. Janet, together with the boys, is keen to go, because we're looking at the first noun, we're not looking at the second noun, which is plural. That is why the verb is in the singular. So make sure you study this. This is what you're going to be questioned on, and you can go and watch this over and over again to make sure you know it. When you look at a bunch or a pear, think of grapes. You say grapes are good to eat because there are lots of little grapes there that you can take. But if we speak of a bunch of grapes, it's only one. It's just one bunch. It is good to eat. We think of trousers, we think of glasses, scissors are expensive. But when we speak of a pair of trousers, a pair of scissors is expensive. So there's that little bit of a difference there. And you're so fortunate because you're saying a pair of trousers, and that tells you is, a pair is, trousers are. So that assists you. If you remember, the keywords that are going to help you through this, and you're going to see, it's not so difficult after all. When we look at distance, time, amount, when we talk about 10 kilometers, we think of it as one distance. We don't think of it as the 10 kilometers. So it's one distance, and it's not 5 or 10 or 20 or whatever different things. So yeah, we have, when we speak of something like 5 kilometers, for instance, it is too far to walk. You don't say 5 kilometers are too far to walk. You will use that if you grammatically incorrect, and that we're not going to do. Then, of course, we also have 2 kilograms of mince is one quantity. 50 cents is very cheap for a packet of chips. And 30 minutes is too long to wait. So look at that you can identify it, because what are we thinking of here? We think of it as one concept. And that is what's so important here. That is what you need to remember. Now, these are lovely. One of. The minute we refer to one tells us it is usually then singular. But now look at these examples. One of the boys is a keen tennis player. So that tells us that only one of them, there's only one who plays. Only that one is interested in the tennis. But if we say she is one of the girls who love parties, so many girls love parties, but she's only one of them. And they recovered one of the cars that were stolen last year. So many cars were stolen, but only one was recovered. So you have to look at what's going on around it as well with the other words that are giving you an idea of the singular or plural, one of the cars. And we say the cars were stolen, they were stolen. If it was only one car, it would have been in the singular. A group of people. This one I love, because you know what? This one's tricky to say if a learner is wrong or right. If we say, for instance, we're speaking about the class, or the police, or the government, or a team, it could be singular, but it could also be plural. So that will be sort of dependent on how am I looking at the group. Am I looking at the group as a singular, as one unit? They're one unit altogether, or do I see them as individuals? If you say the class is organizing a picnic, then we think of it as a single unit. It's one unit. We can almost think of it as people who are united. And if you say the class are arguing about the food, then we think of these, a whole lot of learners, different learners, and they all arguing about stuff. So then we have the idea that it's individuals. And it's also, if you speak of a crowd, if you think of a match, soccer match, rugby match, where all the spectators go together and they stand together and they sing the national anthem so beautifully, then we will say South Africa is singing the national anthem, because then it's one unit, everyone standing together. Then you can use it as singular, which is actually so beautiful. So remember, when you do have to respond to this, look at the sentence that's been given, or the statement, and then you decide from what you've read, is the statement referring to our learners or our group as a single unit, or is it referring to them as individuals, because if it's a singular group or as a united group, it will be singular, and if it's individuals, it's going to be plural. Okay, so when we think of part of, when we think of the part of something, we think of it as a singular verb. Half of the ice cream has been eaten. It has been spilled, so it's singular. But when we think of part of many, it becomes a plural verb. And then we have half of the sandwiches, because we haven't, remember, ice cream was one, but yes, sandwiches are more than one. So that would be have been eaten. 3/4 of the boys have stayed at home. There we get the idea of part of one or part of many. 1 plus 1. I'm going to quickly do this one, and then we're going to get to the quiz, okay? If we say 25 plus 20, we say it is 45. Notice how with maths, with sums, we're making it singular. 3 times 200 makes 6, equals 6, is 6, or 600 rather. Oh, my maths is disastrous today. So 3 times 200 is 600. 60 divided by 10 equals, makes, or is 6. Aren't you glad I'm not teaching you maths today? I left the 2 zeros out the previous sum. But just to give you an idea that we're thinking of it as singular. Okay, so remember that. And you'll see that it's written in numbers here. Now, remember that practice makes perfect. I want you to click on the link and complete the exercise by selecting the correct concords. There will be some that are wrong, but there is one correct response in each one. And herewith, I'd also like to acknowledge English in Action, which is a very old book, but if you can get hold of it, it's worth its weight in gold. There is your lesson 12, grade 8 of 2024. You can click on the QR code and you will be able to complete this as well. So have a wonderful afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us.